Life is so hard. A man often catches himself at this thought. Something's not working out. Material difficulties. Faced with harsh reality, dreams are shattered. Unhappy love, loneliness. Moreover, the inevitable aging, illness, and death. Why so much suffering? It seems I was born only to suffer. Undoubtedly, most people have had similar thoughts. But after thinking about it, can you then distance yourself from suffering? I'm afraid not. That's usually how people go through life, carrying suffering on their shoulders and deceiving their souls. Meanwhile, I could not make such a compromise. Of course, I had my suffering, too. But I was too inept to deceive myself. Usually, in such a state, the only thing left to do was to die. So what did I do? In search of true happiness, I went headlong into the spiritual world. I am inquisitive by nature, and if something interests me, I plunge into it, forgetting myself. It was already very difficult. After all, no matter what you say, I was doing something that no one else knew. I walked by feeling in the dark for several years. Along the way, I was at the very bottom of life, and I had a lot of grief. Out of the frying pan into the fire, as they say, what I did to get rid of my misery brought me more misery. However, I didn't give up my quest for true happiness, as I began to feel some results of my efforts. I encountered yoga, and found the certainty that by attaining liberation, I would be able to transcend life and death and find true happiness. Since then I have devoted myself completely to spiritual practice, relying on the Yogic Sutras. Yoga is interesting because the criterion for spiritual development in yoga is the acquisition of supernatural abilities. In other words, the level of yoga you're on is exactly defined by the supernatural abilities you've gained. Of course, I, too, gradually developed these abilities, and somehow, without noticing it, I found myself having them. They were, however, only a supplement. My ultimate goal was liberation. I soon achieved what the Yogic Sutras call the final stage of yoga. But it was different from the liberation I was seeking. It was still an intermediate stage. When I realized this, I felt myself find myself back in the darkness. What should I do now? What do I practice to reach a higher level? For a while, I had a period of stagnation. Then one day I felt India, the cradle of yoga, calling to me. In those days I had absolutely no free time, but I still decided to go to India, believing I would get some kind of clue there. But I must have been too hasty and made a mistake worthy of an anecdote. I met a rather famous yogi in India who said to me, "I am a pre-liberationist. I know how to get there." Believing these words, I became his disciple. I revered him as my guru, my spiritual teacher, made big donations to him, and asked him to give me instructions. However, he did not teach me anything. Instead, unconcerned about how he would look in the eyes of others, he only tried to maintain his lavish lifestyle. Nevertheless, being in India for more than 2 months eventually led me to liberation. What I needed was solitude. At the time I was on a stage called Denial of This World and Detachment from Cravings, which is described in one of the next videos, so I omit it here. In the holy Himalayas, I was able to practice in solitude. Normally, for me, who was always busy, no such opportunity existed before or since. That must have been why India called me. Thus, after many twists and turns, I'd finally attained liberation. As I expected, it was beautiful. A state of absolute freedom and happiness, in which suffering is destroyed and life and death are surpassed. There is no exaggeration in this description. Sakyamuni Buddha also reached this state. When I reached this stage, I learned for the first time that the law of the stage of emergence of the 12 conditions left by Sakyamuni Buddha was the path to attaining liberation. And it coincided completely with the way of practice that I had been using myself. It was a bit annoying that I hadn't discovered it sooner, but that couldn't be helped, as even Buddhist scholars didn't know about it. However, Now I can show you this secret path based on the law of the stage of emergence of the 12 conditions and my own experience. First of all, I would like you to watch the new video lecture series Real Kundalini Yoga. Your soul must be longing for this. Preface. There are 3 processes of spiritual practice in any of the practical schools. First, there is the process called Hinayana, which is aimed at the supreme liberation and enlightenment of the individual. In Buddhism, it translates as little chariot. Second, there is a process called Mahayana in which the practice is aimed not only at one's liberation but also at the development of others and their absolute freedom and happiness. This process translates as the Great Chariot. Thirdly, as a variant of the Great Chariot, there is a process called Tantrayana. Generally, it is believed that more than 1,000 lives are needed to reach the final goal of the Big Chariot. And in the process of Tantrayana, to the level of Mahayana Buddha is completed in such a short period as 1 or more lives. In Buddhism, this process is called the Mystery Mantra Chariot. Only upon attaining all 3 chariots described above can one claim to have attained a complete method of spiritual practice. The 3 processes of these chariots are exemplified in the personal experience in this series of videos. In the course of your practice, when you feel that you have come to failure, have doubts, or are going through pain, this course is sure to be a help to you. It will encourage you and lead you to the final stage of the practice. After years of practice, there's a lot to add. But I intentionally left that out, because when one practices a video course, especially one that describes everything in detail, there are points that can lead the practitioner to a misunderstanding. After all, there are always personal situations and differences. This is why from time immemorial the great gurus have been imparting the truth through verbal initiations. Now I am doing the same thing. And I would like you to understand that we don't know when the army of death will overpower us. The only way to avoid defeat under its onslaught is to live seriously by the law of truth. And it is my earnest wish that those who watch this series of videos will find faith in the world of meditation, the world of samadhi, and transcend life and death. This is not a commercial project. For as many people as possible to come across this information, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment of 8 words or more.